Okay, so this is 2008 higher level. It's a solids in contact question to start off with in part A, and then it moves into part B. There's a developments section to the question as well, so it's a 2-in-1 type of a question. The elevation and plan view of this rectangular shape is given, and the corners are just rounded off. As you can see, it's inclined at 30 degrees in the plan view, and then the elevation of it here is given as a height of 75. So to draw that would be quite straightforward. Also, what's given is a cylinder A, which has the top of it sliced off at an angle of 45 degrees, and you can see the plan view position given of the cylinder like so. So the first part of the question just asking to draw the elevation and plan view of both of those objects, to show the points of contact between them, and then when you've finished all that, to include a third shape, which is a hemisphere. You can see it here having a radius of 35, and they want that to be touching both of the existing shapes that are already in place. So we have to show points of contact again. Once you have the plan and elevation finished in full with the three shapes, the second part of the question is then asking you to draw a development of one of the shapes, and it's asking you to draw a development of surface A, and surface A belongs on the cylinder, as you can see. Now when it asks for surface A, and you can see surface A clearly labelled here in elevation, we wouldn't be required to include the top of the cylinder, like the cover of it, or the base piece either. We're only required to actually draw what they ask us, and they just ask for that surface. So we'll come to that towards the end of the question. To begin with, I'm going to draw my plan view. It's inclined at 30 degrees, the length is given, the width is given, and the corners are rounded off. So I'll draw that to begin with. Now this outline shape can go heavy once I have all my points made. There's nothing covering it. And really, a huge amount of marks in this question are going for showing points of contact, making sure the constructions of how you found all the points in the makeup of each shape are clearly visible. So just make sure everything is very obvious how you found it. Keep light lines light, obviously, but make sure it is obvious how you found all your points. So that's the plan view of the first shape. In elevation, it has a height of 75, so that would be straightforward. Now I won't draw the elevation completely heavy just yet because some of the pieces are in front of it, so we'll just leave it like that for now. Okay, the next thing I'm going to draw is the cylinder, and if you look at the question, the cylinder has a radius of 15 and it's touching my first shape along its front edge here, but it's also in line with the side of it here. There's a line given to indicate that. So we're going to draw that line to begin with, down in plan view. So it has to touch against that. It basically has to be between these two. Okay. So the easiest way of doing that, there's a few ways you can find the exact point for it, the centre point for it. Probably the easiest way is take the radius of it, which is 15, and if you know that it has to be touching against that line that I've just drawn, that construction line, Well, then the centre point has to be 15 mil away from that line. Likewise, if you know it has to be touching the edge of this object, the centre point has to be 15 away from that as well. So if we draw two parallel lines to both of those lines where they cross over, will give us the exact centre point. So that's 15 away, it's parallel, and then I do exactly the same thing with the other line. I make a mark 15 away from it, I draw a 30-degree line to make it parallel, and then that's your point in common. So that point there is exactly 15 away from my first construction, and it's exactly 15 away from the initial object as well. So I can draw my radius 15 circle then to show the plan view of that cylinder. To clearly show the point of contact, it's going to be a right angle against the side of the object, so that will be a 60-degree line in this case, and then just label point of contact, POC. Now drawing that in elevation, it's just a case of bringing it straight up. We have the width of it. And then just take note that the top is sliced at an angle of 45 degrees, and they tell us that in the question. So that's the surface A that they're talking about. The hemisphere is going to fit in this area in the elevation. Now if we look at the hemisphere, it's given as a radius of 35. And they also tell us that it's touching both objects. So we're going to go down to our plan view to draw it, and then we'll bring it up to the elevation later on. We're going to do it in a very similar way to how we found the cylinder down here. We're going to add on the radius and find the common ground. So radius 35, just keep that in mind. Now, in exactly the same way as I found this object, the cylinder, touching against my initial object, I measured out 15. I'm going to do the same for my hemisphere, except I'm going to be measuring out 35. And drawing a parallel line. So the hemisphere, which is going to touch against this, the centre point of it has to be somewhere along there, because that's exactly 35 away from that line, and they're parallel to each other. It also has to be exactly 35 away from the edge of this cylinder that I included earlier on. So I have to come away at 35 from that. Now, how would I come away at 35 from a curved line? What I'll do is I'll get the existing radius of that object, which is 15, and add 35 onto it. So if I add 15 and 35, that will give me a radius of an arc of 60. And again, if I was to arc that around, if I was to put a centre point anywhere along that arc, it would be in contact with the edge of the circle. I'm looking for the common ground, so where both of them cross over each other will give me the centre point I'm looking for. Radius 35. Sorry, that should be an arc of 50. Added it up wrong, not 60. 15 and 35 gives you 50, not 60. Now, that's my centre point that I'm looking for. And just double check that it does touch, and it does. I'll draw the plan view of the hemisphere. Now I've kind of run out of space there. It wouldn't make any difference to the drawing itself, but you would lose some marks, so just be careful of that when you are doing the question, that you give yourself enough space to include everything. You more or less have to judge it by eye, really. And once we have the centre point of that, we can bring it straight up to elevation. Remember, it's a sphere that's cut in half. It's a hemisphere, so the centre point is going to be on the ground in elevation. And I can draw radius 35 hemisphere. Just include the hidden detail. The cone will be hidden behind it, the cylinder will be hidden behind it, so hidden detail for that. And in terms of showing points of contact, go back down to your plan view. It's touching two objects, so we're going to have 2 points of contact. When you have curved surfaces hitting against each other, the point of contact just join the centres. So the cylinder and the hemisphere join the centres, and where they meet along the two surfaces, that's your point of contact. Label it point of contact. When you bring that up to the elevation, remember it's half a sphere you're talking about, so the widest point is going to be on the ground. So that point of contact will be on the ground in elevation. To find the point of contact between a curved object and a flat surface, you just make a perpendicular line from the centre point, the same as we did over here. So that'll be a 60-degree line in the plan view. And that'll give me the point of contact between them. And likewise, because it's a hemisphere, the widest point is on the ground, so that point of contact will be on the ground in elevation. Right, so that would complete part A of the question. Plan and elevation finished. Now looking at part B, we're asked for a development of surface A. So again, once again, we don't have to include the closed surface on the top or the base of it either, just that wrapped surface that's cut at 45 degrees across the top. You can draw it anywhere on the sheet, but as you unwrap that surface, the height of it is going to remain the same. So you might as well try and fit it in somewhere where you have the heights already, rather than having to transfer them all over the page. So in terms of surface A, you have the height of surface A in your elevation, from the base point up to where it's cut at 45 degrees. So I will try and create my development up where my elevation is. I can draw it over to the right if I have space, or I can draw it over to the left. It's up to yourself. So what I'll do is I'm going to put it over towards the left hand side. I'll bring over the base of it. I'll bring over the top, the highest point. So I'm going to unwrap the surface within this area here. Now when you're unwrapping a cylindrical shape, the best thing to do is to break it up into segments. We'll worry about the cut section at the top towards the end, but just unwrap it first of all in order to get a circumference for the whole shape. So to split it up into segments, we're going to go back down to our plan view. The cylinder appears as a circle in plan view. So if we split that up into 12 segments using the 30-60 set square, it'll give us the circumference of the shape when it's unwrapped. Okay, so all of those segments or those slices are exactly the same. So if I take the length of one of them along the outside and just track it out 12 times, it'll give me the total circumference. So what I'll do is I'll create a starting line first of all. Okay, just keep it light for now. So that's where I'm going to start unwrapping the surface. And I'll step that out 12 times to unwrap it. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 11, 12. Okay, so that gives me a total width from here to here for my surface. The light is going bad on that. Okay, Now, across the bottom of the object, it's not going to cause any problems. The top is where the cut is taken out of it. So what we're now going to do is we're going to go back to the plan view, number each of those segments that we just marked off. Okay, and we can number them in any order, don't need to worry about that. What I might do is the lowest one is obviously going to be the one that matches up with this point here. So I'll start that as 0. Although it wouldn't really matter what order you do them in. So the one on the very left, I'm going to start that as being point 0. And you can go clockwise or anti-clockwise, it doesn't make any odds. So I'll go clockwise and label them as you go around. Now what we'll do is we'll transfer those up and see where they hit that 45-degree cut. They should kind of go up in pairs. So for instance, 11 and 1 are the one line, 10 and 2 are the same line, and so on. Now what we'll do is we will take the height of each of those individually and then mark them up off over here. So what we need to do is number these so they match up with what we're talking about. So we start with 0. Count them out. And then when you get to the last one, it's the same as the first. So that'll be double labelled. Because when you wrap it around, the last point and the first point are the same when they come around each other. And what we now do is we take the height of each of those individually and we mark them off. So I'm going to measure up the height of point 0 and I'm going to mark it over here in my surface development. I'll just draw a line up on each one of those so I can mark off the height. You can kind of mark these to save time. Remember, 2 of the points are going to be the same. So if point 1 and point 11 have the same height, there's no point in measuring twice. Just keep that in mind and mark them off as you go along. Point 2 and point 10 have the same height, and so on. And finally, the highest point is the one on the very right hand side, and that's point 6 as I labelled it. Your numbering may be different, so don't get confused if the numbers don't match up to mine. As long as the shape matches up, that's all that matters. Now, freehand curve, to just join those together. Take your time with that, there's no rush. And there will be marks going for the neatness of that. And when you're finished with that, you can go over your development heavy. Remember, it is asked for, so clearly label that part of the question as being part B. Or put an arrow towards it saying surface development of A, or whatever way you want to label it. Okay? So, the complete drawing, plan, elevation, complete, 3 shapes, and the surface development of surface A.